Hello, I want to talk about the law today. We have a lot of problems, even within the legal system. And when I talk about the legal system, we have what's called criminal law, and then we have other law, right? So certainly there are many problems with the criminal justice system. And so I want to look at that a little bit. I'm going to do several videos on justice, but I'm sort of interested also right now in just how do we have this law? Where does it come from? Do our lawmakers really understand it? And what's going on with the law and what are the consequences? So, where does the law come from? What does it rest on? Well, it really goes back. Western law actually is based on Roman law, the law of the Roman Empire. And of course, at the time of the Roman Empire, the other civilizations in that area, now centered, I guess, the Middle East and so on, were the Hebrews or the Jews, and then the Greeks. And the Greeks, of course, were the most philosophical people. They were the ones from whom we derive a lot of our thinking, actually. So they were the first ones really to start sort of analyzing how things worked. They had this idea that everything had a natural place and that reality was simply the expression of everything essentially moving to its natural place or being in its natural place. So the idea was that the sky, or they didn't really think of the sky, they had this idea of like spheres. And so up represented like a realm of eternal, unchanging reality. And down, which is towards the earth, represented the realm of change and decay. And so the natural place for something that was like the earth, like a stone, would have been on the surface of the earth. And that is why a stone will fall to the earth. So they had a sense of there being some kind of an order. And this actually very strongly, of course, influenced the Romans. And then Roman law, of course, was basically introduced in order to rule the empire. So law is seen as a tool, essentially, of government, but it's much more than that. In Roman thought, law is like a manifestation of a certain moral order. So there is a right, there is a wrong. So it's not like you're just making it up. Let me read to you what A.N. Whitehead says, Alfred North Whitehead, in this book, Science in the Modern World. So he basically said that the law was formed instead of being a mere empirical system adjusted to the existing requirements of society. It laid down abstract principles of right to which it endeavored to conform. So you could just think, well, if I want to control society, then I have to tell people what to do. And it's just because, I have to deal with this situation. So I'm going to make up a law for this situation so that people will, conform to what I want them to be. And in that situation, I'll make up a law for that too. So that's sort of like adjusting society to what you want, but it's not really based on any higher principle. So the amazing thing about Roman law is that it actually was based upon this higher principle, that there is a right and there is a wrong. So as Western society, or usually essentially became Western Christianity, then this permeated people's thinking over a very, very long time, many centuries. And we have lived according to the law. And we have lived with the idea that there is a certain order and that there is a wrong and the right. So our law actually reflects the idea that there is a right. There are principles of right and wrong. So essentially, for during the medieval times, for a very long time, there was really not much progress in terms of, like, there wasn't much change. I wouldn't say there wasn't a lot of progress, but basically people didn't really think analytically so much about what's right and wrong. It was clear. You followed what the Bible said. You had to go along with what is written in your sacred texts. And so, people didn't really worry about it too much. There wasn't much challenge to this. But gradually over time, then eventually science turns up. And people are starting to think, but science really sort of turned up in the sense of, well, I want to see. I want to actually test things out. Like if Aristotle says that a large stone will hit the ground earlier than a small stone because the large one is heavier, Galileo says, hey, well, I think we better check that one. And it turns out that actually it wasn't true. So science looks at actual fact. But science started almost like with opposition from the sort of medieval authorities who were not so interested in testing actual fact, I guess, or wanted to essentially keep, this idea of a moral order based on the Bible. But the law then is helping us through this time, because what science does, it sort of allows for people to start to think, well, is there really a need for God? Right? Because sooner or later, Newtonian physics treats the whole universe as a big machine. So do you need a God? Because it's actually just following along with the laws of physics. Maybe God might have started off the laws of physics and the universe and so on, but we don't need a God to maintain it from day to day. So, and then also everything is based on chance. It's not really leading anywhere. It is really purposeless if you look at the whole idea of Newtonian mechanics. So then you start to get this, the growth of a lot of questioning now at that point. And you have the idea of secular law. Maybe law should just be based on what are the consequences for humans if we act this way or that way. Can we define a set of rules that gives the best outcome in terms of humans, right? And that's very reasonable, a very reasonable way to think. But if we look at law today, we find that in America, we have huge mass incarceration. We have a law called Truth in Sentencing that people have to stay in jail to finish 85% of their sentence before there can be any way for them to get out. And some states have changed that and some haven't. But the point is that there are people in jail now who've been there for 30, 40, 50 years. And people are getting sentences of 120 years, 200 years. This is sort of crazy. This is not justice. This has nothing to do with justice. This is the law run wild. And judges are different. Some of them probably do choose to not give these 120-year sentences, but many of them just simply go along with the law and dole out these huge long sentences because they can, and because the law has been defined in such a way that you almost have to think of mandatory minimums, right? Mandatory minimums says that if somebody does this particular action, they have to get at least a 7-year sentence in jail. So, in other words, human input is sort of excluded. And I'm sure that there are most judges don't like to give these huge sentences and don't like to sentence people to 7 years because some very clever prosecutor has managed to portray whatever they did as being a crime that has to have a mandatory minimum sentence. So I would say that human input has been excluded way too much. And that even people who are trying to reform the laws in different states are really having a hard time to get their reformations through in some states. And that the law is no longer leading us towards what we consider to be just outcomes. Every time we have a technological breakthrough, then it takes a long time for the law to sort of catch up with it. So in the Industrial Revolution, it took a long time before the law said that children under 7 or whatever, under 9, weren't allowed to work in the mines or the factories, right? It took a long time. It's taking a very long time for us to deal with the digital revolution. Right now, people are able to use the digital revolution to take all of our information and sell it to each other and use it without even our knowledge, right? Let alone compensating us. And there's no laws against that. Or the gun lobby is able to stop a law preventing certain use of guns or certain ownership of guns. So the law is a great servant, but it's a really bad master because it doesn't include human judgment, human recognition of people's motivation. There is no recognition of motivation when you sentence a young man who is in a car with somebody who goes totally unknown to them, has a gun and shoots somebody because they get into a fight somewhere. Because that young person was with the person with a gun, the law says they have to be put in jail. And sometimes they get put in jail for several decades, even though they had no idea that there was a crime going to be committed or that anybody had a gun. So that law is wrong, needs to be changed. And most people believe, obviously, it's sort of obvious that it needs to be changed because it's not based on motivation, but our law needs to be based on motivation. Mens rea, right? So we need to really stop and think about our law. Okay, thank you.